Welcome to CSM Mastermind, everyone. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our success coaching training program, and we're back for our monthly live webcast today, talking about how active listening can play a part in improving outcomes. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training, now with more than 19,000 students, actually almost 19,500 students on our platform from nearly 100 countries. Our training programs are available in a variety of formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps, and we're accepting registrations for all of our virtual instructor-led programs through the end of the year. We still have a few seats left for both level 1 and level 2 boot camps that are led by myself, as well as my partner, Aaron Thompson, in November, and our change management for customer success and outcome-based selling boot camps in December. Ashley is going to drop a coupon code for 20% off any November or December boot camps. So check those out and take advantage of that discount. We'll also be posting our 2023 training schedule on our website sometime in the next few weeks, including our spring coaching programs being offered in partnership with the University of San Francisco. Find out more at successcoaching.co. For those of you who haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic that's relevant to customer success. Regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, or the sizes of the customers that you deal with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful for you. The schedule for our upcoming events can also be found at successcoaching.co. And once again, click on that link on that survey to have some input on what happens in 2023 regarding events. But you click on the events tab at the top of the page to find out more. And like I said, please participate in our current survey that we're running about our topics for next year. I really just need you all to take 2 minutes to click on that link that Ashley just once again dropped into chat, and select your top 6 topics from the list of 18 that we've provided. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is recorded, and we'll be posting a replay along with a transcription on our website early next week. We will be taking questions later on during the webinar, so please don't be shy and use that Q&A button found at the bottom of your screen to ask or upvote a question. We're also broadcasting on LinkedIn Live, and we've got somebody monitoring that feed. Thank you, Tracy. So if you have questions and you're watching on LinkedIn Live, post them, and they'll be relayed to us. Also, please keep all commentary to the chat window. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. In this series, we focus on practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those practicing customer success on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite 3 panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. So, without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are and what they do. And as usual, let's get started in alphabetical order with Bertil.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everyone. My name is Bertil Vey. I'm located in San Francisco. I'm a senior CSM at Cloudflare. We are a CDN infrastructure security firm. I've been 12 years on the market. I recently pivoted from account management to my current role 3 years ago. I personally am obsessed with CSM in the sense that I think it's really about the client desired outcome and how to make our client widely successful, and excited to be here. Thank you, Andrew.
Wait. I thought, can't you just change your title from account manager to customer success manager and you're ready to go?
I've been a customer success for 3 years now.
Yeah, I know. I was being facetious.
Oh, sorry about that.
There's a transition there, right? We get a lot of people coming down to sales and in account management, moving to customer success, but it's more complicated than just, just changing the title on your business card, right?
Absolutely. Well, this would be a good segue for another conversation, but yes, absolutely. Yes. It's a little more challenging.
Awesome. Bertil, thank you for joining us. Daniel, you're up.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, everybody. My name is Daniel Chavone. I'm the Director of Customer Experience at SingleOps. or business operations software for green industry and landscaping businesses. I've been in the CS world for about the past 10 years as a CSM, managing CSM teams and leading. Now I manage all the CS functions in my current role. So communication has always been front and center in all of those roles. I think regardless of whether you're a CSM or not, being able to actively listen is a hyper relevant topic, especially in today's world. So excited to be a part of the conversation. Appreciate the invite and excited to jump into it today.
Especially in today's world. Isn't that true? Man, if more people listened more actively, boy, things would be a lot different, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, there's a lot more distracting our ears. So, it's so important to focus.
It is. Thanks, Daniel, for joining us. And finally, Sivan.
Great. Thanks, everybody. My name is Sivan Rinat. I am a Senior Enterprise Customer Success Manager at Monday.com, which is a work management software for many different industries. I've been in the customer success space for about 4.5 years now, in a lot of different facets of customer success. So customer experience, training and enablement, implementation, and now enterprise success. And I came from a psychology background, also worked in legal. So definitely, like Daniel said, very interested in communication as it relates to this topic and tailoring communication to different audiences or different customers or different worlds. So very excited for this discussion, and I'm based out of New York.
Awesome. Thank you, Sivan. We should probably I would be interested in doing a webinar on the psychology of customer success. I
would love that.
Okay.
Let me know when.
Ashley, let's put that one down. Let's put that one down as a possibility. Cool. Thank you. Thank you all for your time today and for your time on Friday during our prep call. Really appreciate it. We all very much appreciate it. So now let's get to the topic at hand. Stephen Covey famously said the biggest communication problem is we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. And that's a big problem. In an effort to quickly respond, we end up missing things because that voice in our heads is concocting a response. You need to give the speaker your undivided attention, both for what they're saying and how they're saying it, in order to respond in the most appropriate and effective way. According to studies, 75% of the time we're in conversations with others, we're preoccupied, we're distracted, we're forgetful. And immediately following conversations, we can recall about 50% of what was said and then 20% an hour later. And why is that? It's because we don't actively listen. What were we talking about? Using active listening when communicating with a customer is so critical to helping them achieve their goals and desired outcomes. So let's start with the basics of active listening. What does active listening really mean?
Yeah, I think the classic training, or when you go over behaviors of active listening, you have your classics of leaning in, seeming interested, nodding, making sounds of affirmations like and saying yes and I agree, or tell me more, encouraging them to continue to share with you so that you can get some useful information. Hopefully, like you said, you're not just rifling through for a response, but kind of inviting them to give you as much information as you can get so that you have something to work with. And at that point, right, kind of starting to Rolodex that information and see what you can do with it when it comes your turn to respond.
Bertil, Sivan, anything to add?
Go ahead, Savannah. Happy to go after.
Okay. I think that there's also an aspect of the intention behind active listening too. So there's definitely that physical aspect, that clear visual of listening. There's also the intention behind it. So the desire to understand and not just to think of the response back, which not to right away jump into psychology, but I think there's also, that takes confidence. I think a lot of people, especially in the CS world, when you start in a new role, people think of it as, well, I don't want people to think, I don't want the customer to know that I don't know the answer or to think I'm asking too many questions because I don't understand, right? So it takes a certain level of confidence to not just be thinking of your response, not just be thinking of how am I going to come off, but to really sit in the moment, sit in what the other person is saying, and be able to take it in and understand.
Wanted to add something that as well from my previous role to my new role as customer success, both active listening, it's a key part, obviously, of the conversation and moving forward. But one thing I particularly like about my current role as a senior CSM is really about active listening and having in the back of your head being focused on the client's outcome, not on what you can present to the client to achieve your own goals. Obviously, your goal is to retain the client and grow the account, but most importantly is what the client is trying to achieve. And active listening as a CSM is used to really focus on those pain points and not so much on yourself, if it makes sense.
Yeah, and one other element that Sivan, that you brought up, the confidence, but I also think it's super important to be self-aware, right? I mean, that's how you become a better active listener, is through that self-awareness.
I was going to try and tie those two thoughts together a little bit, and having the intent of helping your customer, means that you have their desired outcomes in mind when you're communicating with them. And going back to what Sivan was saying, having the confidence to not just respond to give an answer because you're supposed to be, providing information to your customer, right? You're supposed to be the knowledge source or the expert, but kind of using that outcome as the filter to ask yourself, so Andrew, right, to be self-aware, do I have enough information from what they've just told me to provide a valuable information that relates to their desired outcome, right? So kind of being able to take what you've heard, process it through that filter of the desired outcome, and determine, is now a good time for me to say something, or should I shut up and shut up and listen more, or ask another question and try to get at, like, maybe I need to now go at it from this angle. Rarely do people, come right out and answer the question and the questions behind the questions that we, want to ask right out of the gate. So I think a big piece of active listening is getting through a little bit of the surface level and not moving on and taking that as the answer, but probing more deeply. And again, with the intent of understanding so that you can provide a valuable service or help them to achieve their goal.
I think to Daniel's point, and Stephen, I read somewhere that active listening is your right to be wrong. So if you do it, if you actually are in the moment, like right now, we live in a remote world, so we have more distraction. I've got 3 screens in front of me. I had to shut them down because I've got Slack, I've got Google, and so on and so forth, and clients trying to reach out to me, but I had to shut that down to really focus and be in the moment. But again, active listening is your right to be wrong. You listen, you pay attention, you summarize, and once you present your understanding, you actually showed value already in the conversation, even though you didn't understand what the clients meant, but at least you were able to challenge the way they address you and be able to actually be wrong and go back on track.
What you do is you create this situation where what we're trying to do, active listening is about making the other person feel heard. Whether you heard it, whether you think you heard it right or you heard it wrong, you heard something and you're responding back to that speaker with your understanding of what you heard, not parroting back what they said, but in your own words. Here's what I heard you say. And what that does is it gives the speaker, it's 2 incredibly powerful things. Number 1, it gives the speaker an opportunity to correct you. But number 2, which is probably even more powerful, it signifies to the speaker that you actually were listening to them.
Yes. I use that. I mean, when I was a CSM, I called it playing dumb, but I use that as a tactic all the time. It kind of ties back to not having enough or killing your ego enough to not feel like you have to know everything, and really owning the position that you're in. That, I work for a software company. My software company serves green industry businesses. I cannot, I need to know enough, but I just can't know everything about that industry that I'm in. And those customers know that. They should know that. I'm an expert in software and business processes and efficiency and customer success. That's my job. So using that and saying, I'm kind of new to this. Can you explain to me, why that's so important? Or am I correct in then assuming that because you said this, then that? And like you said, give them the chance to educate you. And often you're rewarded by them, being impressed that you have shown the intuition to piece some things together without being an expert in that field or being exposed to it extensively. And, you tend to then get those clarifying points. Oh, actually, not quite that. It's more this, or it's not as important as this other thing that we talked about. And that's extremely valuable for you to be able to take away.
Well, one of the other outcomes from this and we'll get into some of the other outcomes. One of the things that happens as well is that when somebody recognizes that they're being listened to, they're more likely to overshare, right? And I've mentioned "Never Split the Difference" before by Chris Voss on this program many times. It's one of my favorite books. Here's right here on my bookshelf, right? Awesome book. It's about negotiating, but a big part of this is the more we listen and the more the speaker feels that they're being heard, the more likely they are to overshare. And that's where you get, as he refers to in the book, these black swans, right? Those things that you didn't know. And not every black swan turns into something significant, but some of those black swans can lead to huge wins for you as a vendor, huge wins for the customer, because you were able to peel things back that you didn't know and uncover an opportunity to help them get even more value out of your offering.
Andrew, before we move to the next topic, I just wanted to go back to what you said earlier about the two outcomes about active listening. And if you allow me to add a third one on the two very
I will always allow you to add whatever you want, Bertil. I have a tremendous amount of respect for your opinion.
Appreciate that. Thanks. One thing I love about active listening, like really being in the present, is you end up challenging your client. You end up challenging the person you're on the call with, you are having a conversation with. And what I found out often is usually when they're asking questions and specific pain point, those pain points are being shared by upper management. And what I realize is by active listening and with open question is trying to understand why this is a pain point. And often I find out that the person in front of me doesn't really know why this is a pain point. And I think part of being a CSM is empowering our client to become superheroes and being able to go back to the management team and say, this is your pain point. This is how I would like to address that, and come back with innovative ideas that you as a CSM, you empower them within the organization to challenge upper management and say that this is how I will do it. And this is part of active listening, and you cannot get to the bottom of it without really paying attention to what the client said.
And that's a great call out. We're not here to make ourselves stars to your customer senior staff. We're here to make our key stakeholders stars in their eyes. Okay, that, and then we'll get pulled right along. We'll get pulled along right behind them, and that should be good enough. And when they move up the management chain, they're going to pull you along because you help them. You help them get there. And when they decide that it's time to move to another division and they think that you have value, they're going to pull you into there. If they decide to move to another company and you provided value, they think you're going to move, they're going to pull you with you, right? I get excited when people move up the management chain so much so that they go to other companies, because that's another prospect. That's another opportunity. That's another it's a low customer acquisition cost, right? The unit economics are awesome in that. So before we get into kind of some more encouraging, how do we encourage active listening? What are the benefits? All that sort of stuff. What I want to do is quickly throw up a graphic. I normally don't do this, but this is a graphic from our training, just to make sure we're on the same page. This is a framework that we use that we use when we're teaching active listening. We cover it briefly in level 1, and we go into a lot of detail in one of our modules in level 5. But essentially, the cycle of active listening, and there's a bunch of cycles out there on the web, but this is the one that we've adopted, starts with learn. And we talked about that right out of the gate. You want to approach each conversation with a goal of learning something, right? Then you want to listen, right? You want to stop talking. You want to focus closely on what the speaker has to say, right? So that also means turning off all of those distractions, like Bertil mentioned, right? Turning off the Slack and in the email and the chat and the phone. And quieting that voice in your head, right? Then we want to use open-ended questions to open, guide, drill down into the details. Then we want to summarize what we hear in our own words and ask questions to validate our understanding and give them a chance to correct us. Then and we want to be able to encourage people that with positive feedback, if they've got trouble expressing points or they lack confidence. And we want to understand. We want to listen for total meaning beyond what's being said, right? And that's where we want to concentrate on the nonverbal, the emotional, and then we want to be accepting. We want to keep and express an open mind. We want to show respect for another person's message and their point of view, even if you disagree with it. Okay, makes sense. Okay, we're all on the same page. Awesome. So, how do we encourage active listening? How do we encourage our team members to actively listen? Actively listen.
There is
I mentioned it requires a high level of self-awareness, right?
There is a trick that I like to use, and I'm sharing with my peers, especially the youngest one. I like to coach as well on the side, but if you are dedicated to send like a meeting minutes, share with your client what has been discussed, what are the next steps. In the back of your mind, if you keep reminding yourself that this is as an outcome, this is part of your work, that you're going to send the client a summary of what has been discussed, specific next steps, and who does what, timeline, and as much as information. And not often the client will not read it. I give you that. But for yourself, this is the beginning of a good active listening, because you don't want to expose yourself not being able to have captures all of those information and next steps. And so I'm always just write those notes, prep for this meeting ahead of time, but send those meeting notes, share that internally with your client. And this is a good beginning to really become an active listener.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to actually answer one of the questions from the Q&A. Lance had asked about, taking notes for takeaways, and I think that plays in great. I totally agree with Bertil. There's a big difference between being a stenographer and someone who actively listens, right? Just because you wrote down everything that somebody said to you in a meeting does not mean that you were actively listening to them. I think that that's actually a big distraction, the majority of the time, trying to get down, the specific words. I think that usually you can have that conversation, get through that cycle that Andrew just showed, and around the accept stage, in your read back, you want to make sure you've got that understanding. And then it's totally acceptable to say, give me 1 second. I want to make a note of that so that I can, so that I'll share this in our follow-up. And people will give you a minute right there. So it doesn't mean that there is, this uninterrupted flow of communication that brings you to nirvana. I think, it's just before you make sure that you're taking notes on things that are relevant, that you have your notes down, and then you take the time to ask, okay, so I have 4 takeaways. Which of these would you like me to prioritize, so that, you don't go and scurry and waste all your time getting the answer to the first note that you had, but it turns out it's the least important thing of the 4 things that you discussed. I'm always a proponent of asking the extra question. So for me, encouraging active listening is encouraging active questioning. Ask lots of questions to, again, get all of that information to see what black swans kind of fall out from the co-participant.
Sivan, what do you got? What do you got for encouraging, or just, we're starting to talk about strategies for active listening. What do you got?
Yeah, I think note taking is huge. And I saw that Jesse earlier had mentioned in the chat around organizing the input. And so I really like that idea for organizing it into certain categories. Let's say not just repeating back, okay, here's what I heard, but repeating back as, so our goals are this, or so if I'm understanding correctly, the main struggle is this, is that right? I think there are all kinds of wording and strategies that we're hinting at, and that probably, discussing with your teams is a great way to see what other colleagues do and how they do that. But the other thing when it comes to note taking is I think sometimes people hesitate, because we talked about all of the nonverbals, right? We talked about the making eye contact, nodding, right? Showing that we're listening. But when you're taking notes, especially if it's on your computer, right, that can be hard. And so I think that going back to that intention piece, you can call that out, right? You can say, I'm listening, by the way, I'm just taking notes because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Or if you're someone who is maybe also a little bit self-conscious of repeating it back and being wrong, right? Calling it out, saying, I'm going to paraphrase, or I'm going to summarize to make sure I understand. So I think being really literal about what you're about to do, I think helps with still connecting well and encouraging the oversharing that Andrew, you're referring to, while still taking down that information.
Yeah, I also think that, and by the way, we will get to questions, so please use that Q&A button at the bottom to ask questions. We'll get to questions here in a few minutes, so ask away as well as upvote. But I'm a huge fan of leveraging technology, so I have automatically record every Zoom call that I have with everybody. And I've been doing this for 5 years, and I've had, I think, 2 instances in 5 years with somebody asked not to record the call. And the reason I record my calls is so that I can be present, so that I can talk, so that we can have a conversation, and so that I don't have to worry about taking down tons of notes. There are a few things, like when I need to, when somebody says something and I want to make sure I jot a few things down so that I can, in my own words, I can summarize those and I can repeat them back to them. But I leverage the recording capabilities in Zoom. You can do it in pretty much any of the telepresence apps. And if I need to go back to that call to reference it, I can do that. I can listen to the call. But there are also a ton of services out there where I can get that call transcribed. And I believe Zoom even has a plugin for transcription. But I tend to use an AI service called Temi, Temi. That at least last time I checked, it's 10 cents a minute. So you're talking about $3 for a 30-minute call. It is worth the $3 to stay connected to the individual that I'm talking to get that transcription, then be able to go through that and pull my notes from that, which I then embed in my, if I'm talking to a prospect in an opportunity that I'm working for. Gong is another product out there that does that sort of thing. So, you leverage technology if it allows you to maintain the connection that you're trying to establish. That's really what we're doing, right? We're trying to establish a connection. When I'm talking to my daughter, my 13-year-old, and as you can probably imagine, she's a TikTok, 13-year-old kid that's on TikTok and does the thing, blah, blah, blah. As soon as she brings that smartphone up to her face, I stop talking to her. I've lost my connection with her, right? But when I sit down and I talk to her and she's responding to me and we're making a connection, I'm repeating things back to her. She knows I'm listening, right? And we've made a connection. And that's what we're trying to do with our customers, especially through active listening. Active listening it's a superpower for customer success managers, because at the end of the day, your success is going to be driven by the relationships that you are able to make and the connections you're able to make with your customers.
I think that recording a call, and I know a couple of people in the chat, Khalid and Lauren mentioned Gong, and Gong has metrics that show amount of time to respond, right? So did you pause and give them the time to finish what they were saying, or longest monologue, both from the customer and from you? Stats like that can actually, I think, very directly address active listening, as probably some of the other softwares have as well. And I think what it does is it also takes the pressure off and allows you to treat every call as an opportunity for more discovery, because I can figure out the solution or how to get them to the outcome that we were talking about earlier later, when I look back at the call or when I do some of that work, and I don't have to solve everything right there on a call if I'm able to actively listen in the moment. So I think recording also kind of takes that pressure off as well.
Yeah. And to bounce on what Sivan and Andrew mentioned about technology and tips to actually be in the moment, we all have 2 ears in one mouth. We should be listening twice and speak twice less. And one thing I love to do is we all have in the back of our mind things to ask, and is it relevant? And one thing I like to do, back to this note taking, is I'm always typing the question of the topic I would like to discuss, because if you don't do it, you're going to miss it, because it won't happen right away, and help to navigate the conversation as we just did earlier. And I said, Andrew, before we move to the next topic, I would like to add something about this current one and move on.
That's a great point. We've talked about some strategies, right, around connecting with people and actively listening. We've talked about paying attention, turning off the distractions. One other thing is to your point around open-ended questions is actually prepare, right? Be prepared for these calls, right? Or these conversations or these face-to-face meetings. You shouldn't show up and figure you're going to wing it. What are the open-ended questions that you can sit down with that you think are going to have an impact? Questions that begin with what and why and how, right? Some of my favorite questions that I ask leaders when we're talking about our training program is, what's on your plate right now in your role? How are you measured by your boss or peers? I mean, that one floors people. Nobody ever asks them that kind of question. Now, tell me about how your role, your team, your organization play a part in achieving your overall corporate goals. Those types of questions really can open things up and can expose a lot of great detail, a lot of great information if you're listening and you are demonstrating that you're listening, and they're going to end up sharing more.
I love the question that you said, the what's on your plate right now. I think with a tool like Monday.com, that's essential because it's very flexible. So it depends on what the user is working on. It depends on what the customer is working on. And by asking that kind of question, again, this goes back to the value, the outcome versus the feature or the product. Because instead of asking, well, how can this feature work for you? Or let me figure out which feature is right for you. We can focus on, what are you busy with? What is on your plate? What is causing you stress right now? And then you sort of insert yourself and your product or service or offering into whatever it is that they're busy with. So then tomorrow or after lunch, after the call, right, when they're back to working on that thing that's on their plate, they can start to envision how whatever it is that you discussed can help solve it. And it becomes relevant to what they're working on, and you become almost part of their work in a good way.
Well, see, that's a great call out, because what it does is it allows you to connect what you do, what you offer, to something in it for them, right? Which is the key to driving change and getting your product adopted, getting whatever you have adopted, right? The what's in it for me. You need to be thinking about the what's in it for me for everybody, from your end users all the way up to the key stakeholders. And your end users, the what's in it for me may be workflow related. This is going to help me get through my process much quicker, like what you probably offer with a solution like Monday.com. But for the CIO, the what's in it for me is not the workflow. It's the results of having a more efficient operation and being able to streamline onboarding and all these other things that person is likely being judged on, right? They're likely, that's how they're being measured. That's likely how they're being comped.
Yeah,
I love that. Go ahead, Daniel.
This is just near and dear to me. I feel like on a day-to-day, it is so easy for anyone that's in a customer-facing role, especially, I think the majority of folks probably on this work in a SaaS organization, and you think about how many products you use on a day-to-day basis and just to get our jobs done. But then when it comes to our tool, we think that there's somebody on the other end thinking about it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. But we tend to open conversations with, and I'll just, call my team out. Sure. How are things going with single ops? Fine. What do you mean? I don't know. I use like 10 things a day. It's like not melting down on me currently. So it's fine. Right. And we say like, oh, great talking to you. I'll call you back in 30 days. Like, can we use you as a reference? And we move on. And it's just so crazy because people don't even know what to ask about. They don't know all the different things that we could do for them, all the different areas of their organization that could potentially benefit from it. So like Sivan's saying, if you want to back into your solution for them, talk about all the things that are going on in their world. Ask them, what they're working on, what is on the sticky note that's attached, that's hanging from your monitor. What is that thing that you've written down and you need to work on, but you haven't gotten around to it yet? Maybe I can tackle that. I love that question. People, if you want to listen, you need people to talk. People are going to talk about things they care about. They typically don't care about your solution. Sorry. Dose of reality for everybody. Hot take, CS hot take. They want to.
It's true. They don't care about you. So they care about achieving their objectives. You're one piece of a big puzzle that they have to deal with, right?
Yeah. So back into that, and it typically, again, it's going to require you to ask 3 or 4 questions to get to. Have you considered using single ops to tackle that? But if you haven't established it as an issue, proposing it as a solution or the first topic that you want to talk about, it's just weird. It's off-putting people and they want to get out of the conversation with you. So trying to move on is not what you want your conversation to be with. And on the topic of hot takes, I did want to challenge something. I know I saw Bob had to drop, but Bob put something in the chat about active listening being about not having an agenda. And I'll challenge that and say that it's about figuring out, you want to be actively listening for those openings to get to you're driving down, there's probably going to be a few things, but to use an analogy, you're looking for that off ramp to your solution. So you want to keep, and that's always your agenda. That's in the back of your head. Sorry, but I'm comped on revenue growth. I'm not comped on good feelings. I got to find ways to get you, to that off ramp of my solution. And so having an agenda is key to that. Now, you don't want to just be a battering ram and force that topic, but trying to continually find ways that problems can be solved. What I'm here to do is exactly what the agenda of this call is.
Yeah, I would challenge you back on that, Daniel. And I think agenda, to me, it's more what's your goal? What is the purpose? What's the goal of the conversation? What are you looking to achieve? And a thing that I love doing with my client, regardless how senior they are in the organization, is I'm always putting myself in the position, if you do an EBC with the CEO of this company, what are you going to hear and discuss with this CEO? The CEO doesn't care about your zero trust access network solution, but they will say, hey, we are growing the acquisition. Therefore, we have multiple users from different organizations, different email address that are actually looking to access our infrastructure. How can we allow those people to safely access our content while monitoring everything? And then you ask questions, but it's about those pain points. Back to your point, Sivan, Andrew, and Danielle. It's what's your goal? What do you want to discuss? There is something a slide that I always bring up during those QBR, EBR, EBC, and high-level conversation is I like just to pause the relationship for a second and say, this is our understanding of what you're currently working on. And you start with the CEO's vision over the next 5 years. What he or she said, where the company will go, revenue growth, breaking into specific market, launching specific product. Some of the underneath is some of those initiatives that are related to those pain points, to those goals, and how each team will be impacted and what needs to be done and when to achieve these big pictures. We don't talk about product, we don't talk about features, we talk about those clients' outcome. And then you bring the sales team to close the loop, but it's really about those outcomes for the client.
It's all about the outcomes, and those that agenda, that goal, whatever you want to call it, should inform, for example, the set of questions and when you're preparing, right? But once again, it's not how are you going to use our product. It's tell me what's going on in your world. Help me understand what keeps you up at night. What are the things that you are being judged on, that you're being compensated on? And how do those play into the corporate objectives that your company has? So, all right. How about we take some questions? Yeah. And just a reminder, folks, use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions. Please don't put them in chat, and drop in that link one more time for the poll. For the Slido poll for our topics for next year. Although we've gotten a lot, we got about 80 responses from this group, so we definitely appreciate that. Let's see here. We're going to go with most upvotes to start. All right. So our first question comes from Stacy. Stacy, thank you for the question. Thanks for being with us today. Stacy asks, how do you all approach situations where the call is ended, you're looking at your notes, but you realize you did not capture enough information to proceed with researching the customer's ask?
This is a very relatable question.
All right.
I'll actually tie it back to something that Andrew had mentioned earlier about preparation. I think you need to have an idea of what you're trying to get out of the conversation. So, I think having, whether it's, having questions that you want to have answered in that meeting, or going in with, active initiatives and trying to get status updates on those, or, personnel updates, or whatever the case may be. I'm trying not to oversimplify here, but knowing what you're trying to get out of that conversation and actually having like a tactical checklist, so that before you hang up, you say, wait, let me check my notes. Yeah. Oh, we talked about that. I mean, it's an agenda. I think that for me, one of the things that I constantly harp on my team for is, send the agenda ahead of time. Let people know what it is that you want to talk about. Let them suggest things that they want to talk about. The point of an agenda is not to stick to the agenda. It's to see if other folks have agenda items that they would like to add, and giving people the opportunity to think about what it is that we're going to talk about, because not everyone can think about it on the spot when you just bring something up. So often they hang up and are thinking about questions that they didn't ask either. But now, depending on your engagement model, we could be 2 weeks, a month, 90 days away from that next conversation. So, having that agenda, exchanging that agenda ahead of time, and ensuring that you've covered the agenda at the end of the meeting, I think can really help to avoid that situation from arising in the first place. Yeah, for sure. No, that's good suggestion. So basically, preparation so you can avoid that situation. Bertil, thank you for raising your hand, by the way. I would have called on you without your hand being raised, by the way.
We had this conversation, Andrew. I tend to just jump too much in, so I'm trying to back off a little. Appreciate that. Okay. No, Stacey,
we're all friends here, man.
Appreciate that. Stacey, I think I love your question, and it brings back to we're all human. And I think today, and specifically in this remote world, just highlighting the fact that we're not perfect. We are all human, and just reaching out to your client, reach out internally. Hey, I missed X, Y, Z. I misunderstood this point. Like if you have the chance to have like someone engineers on the call or someone else from your team, have this conversation. If it's a one-on-one with a client, reach out to the client and said, hey, Andrew, great conversation today. I missed a few things. 1, 2, 3. Do you have 15 minutes with me next week? Would love to really understand those pain points and get back to you with a solution. This person will always get back to you and allow you to have the time because you raised your hand and said, I want to make sure that we align. How can I help? I have got 2 more questions we didn't have the time to cover today. And you will always, this is your right to be wrong. And the client wants you to be paying attention, the user, to what they need, and they will allocate the time for you to get to the bottom of it with the help.
Well, your customer wants to get value from the investment that they've made, right? So if you need to ask questions, you need to ask follow-up questions. You miss something, right? Unless you are asking the same question over and over and over again, they should want to be able to clarify things with you because they don't sign up for what you have to offer. They're not paying for what your offering is to spend money. They're paying for to get value from it, to get a return on their investment. Sivan, you got anything to add to Stacy's question?
I think that rather than adding my own, I'll say I think some of the comments in the chat are really good ideas. And I saw that earlier Renee mentioned saying something like, we've just covered a lot of content. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything important. And so to Bertil's point, right, even saying in an email, hey, we covered a lot and it was really valuable for me to understand your perspective. I wanted to clarify a few things or I want to make sure I'm getting back to you on this area. And I was a little unclear on this. Would you be able to clarify for me? So some really good tips of, ways to frame that, but totally agree that being honest and sharing that and just asking for a little more information from them is never a problem.
Awesome.
Plug that time management for CSMs and running effective meetings are topics for potential CS Mastermind sessions in next year. If you want to go in and vote in the Slido poll, you'd really be helping Andrew out.
Thank you, Daniel. You were listening.
Daniel, how much are they paying you?
Yeah, geez.
They pay me in stickers, and I'm
there you go. We'll send you more, man. Stacy, thanks for the question. Our next question comes from Catherine. Catherine, thank you for joining us today. Catherine asks, what are some techniques I can use to ensure the person is listening to me and hearing what I say? I spend time actively listening to the customer, then feel like those messages from me to my colleagues, my boss, software development, aren't being heard. Bertil, looks like you wanted to jump in on this.
Absolutely happy to do that. I think it's a great question because there is nothing worse when you are delivering that like valuable content, or you are actually being an active listener and being with someone who is not paying attention or missed a few things. What I like to do here is, let's say you have an internal conversation and those people do not report to you, but you have to convince them to work with you on a specific project. And this is a challenging part because, again, what is in for them? Like, why should they be helping you beyond the client satisfaction? And one thing, a trick I like to do is after the conversation, internal meetings, I will summarize like a client. And to me, a CSM is your client CSM, but as well your own team CSM. And being able to say, all right, Andrew, Daniel, Sivan, we're on the same team. Andrew, this is my understanding of what's on your plate. This is when we're expecting you to deliver that. Daniel, Sivan, so those are the next steps. Are we okay? Timeline, do you have the time to do that? And then it's your job to actually following up on that. You send an email to summarize everything, and you keep going back and said, hey, Danielle, you mentioned you will be doing that by then. Do you need my help? I love saying that. Rather to say, when can you do it? I said, do you need my help? How can I help you to do it? And I find it an elegant way. This is not from me. It's from a mentor who said, just ask how you can help them to help yourself.
Yeah, so I like that. I like time boxing, super important, right? Let's make sure that we're nailing down specific times that we're expecting things to be done. Also, I always add when it's a situation like that, please get back to me in the next 48 hours if what I've laid out here, the responsibilities, the timeframes, everything is doesn't mesh with what your understanding is. And what you do is you put the onus back on those individuals to step up and either acknowledge or challenge what you're suggesting. Sivan, what else you got to say?
I think it's a tough situation. So I won't pretend that it's something that easily with a technique we can solve it. I think it can happen with colleagues. It can also happen with clients where you're speaking to a client and you just feel like, oh, they are not in this. I think one thing to note is kind of like also cutting yourself some slack and recognizing that that's hard during your workday to feel not listened to. So first of all, just kind of acknowledging that for yourself and that it doesn't mean that that's on you, but also I think in terms of I've had a situation where maybe I'm speaking to someone and I can actually see the light change on their screen in the reflection in their face or in their glasses because they're on another screen and I can tell they're not quite listening, or maybe they kind of like give a response of a monologue that is just not at all related to what we were talking about or a concern. And so I think it can be really tough. Sometimes that's culture. Sometimes that's also, recognizing, okay, is that something that I can change or work within? Or is it a cultural difference? If it's something that maybe can be addressed or a culture you can work within, then I think there are a lot of strategies that you can do, whether it's team-wide or person-specific. So, for example, Catherine, you mentioned software development, right? Maybe your perspective of being that voice of the customer and sharing what a struggle is from a customer or a request, right? Maybe for a feature isn't quite being heard. Maybe it's not quite being understood or addressed. So making sure that you are breaking it down in a way that isn't just about the benefit to you or to the customer, but maybe what is the benefit to that team, right? Figuring out, well, what is important to that particular software development team and how can I frame this in a way that they'll listen or that this will become something that they should pay attention to as well. So I think kind of like speaking in the language and speaking to what's important to your audience can help too.
It's always a great practice also in those types of situations to attach a revenue number to those requests. Hey, by the way, this customer's not happy and they make up X amount of ARR. They make up, this, if we were able to add this feature, we'd be able to sell X number of additional seats that translate to Y amount of revenue. While engineers are very focused on engineering stuff, at the end of the day, they're engineering stuff to be sold, right? To be purchased. And when you can tie a revenue number to that, makes that story, that narrative a lot more compelling.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that a little bit. I think Sivan made a lot of really good points in what she said. So I don't want to dilute it with some of my points, but I think what stood out to me is sort of the organizational maturity. I think the question is very familiar in high growth organizations where everyone has a lot of projects and goals that they're individually focused on. And CS kind of sits at this unique place where, we're customer facing, we represent the product, but we're not on the product team. We kind of exist because the product has shortcomings and is not 100% intuitive. And so there are a lot of dependencies. And the good thing I find is that like the other teams that have a little bit more direct influence, the trade-offs that we're a customer facing part of the organization is not lost on them. So I usually would try to really leverage that, like, hey, I am protecting you from the customer. I am willing to be that buffer and to, be the messenger. And it can be bad news. I'm fine communicating bad news, but I'm going to need news by our scheduled call on Thursday. So can you give me that? And if not, what do we need to do in order to make sure that we can hit that? Or what is the expectation that I can lay out to the customer for a new timeline when we'll have an update on that? I have a little saying for my team. you can't do everything, but you're responsible for it all getting done.
Yep.
Networking and delegation are the two biggest skills of a customer success manager. Maybe not the two, I'll dial that back, but two extremely important skills there.
Well, behind empathy and active listening.
Well, sure, I'll add to the list. But going back to one thing Sivan said about if you have a good organization, huge caveat leading into this next one. A strategy that I would encourage is to let it break. Human heroics only will get a customer success organization so far. Eventually, you have to be able to scale with process. And if answers can't, if answers can't be given to a customer and it's going to cause an issue, a customer escalation, a churn, some sort of negative experience, our job, or CSM's job, is to put that on the radar of the organization, hopefully with enough time for them to take corrective action or to build it into a forecast. We can see the iceberg. It's not your job to change course of the ship. It's to let somebody know that the iceberg's coming. So I think there's a kind of a fine balance that we have to strike, and you have to be okay, that we can't do everything or solve every issue here. But I think, it is your job to make sure that expectations are set and deadlines are met and those types of things. But if they just can't be, trying to support it and scramble to get all that information yourself is impossible or unsustainable.
And I would add something from what Sivan mentioned as well, is I think as well as the difference between a good CM and a great CM. A good CM will always bring up incident, issue, and challenges account-based. And a great CM will come up to leadership and say, this is how we can scale, and this is the overall impact, not only on one account, but this is how this incident is impacting our book of business, and bring that information up to your leadership as you will bring valuable insight to your client executive team. And essentially, that's the reason why I believe that CSM is a client CSM, but as well the CSM of their own team and leadership, because you bring valuable information. But most importantly, you really need to scale this data.
Very much so. Very much so. Just a reminder, we stick around for we're here until 1:15, so we'll keep answering questions, even though we've only answered two. All right. No, the good discussion though. Our next question comes from let's see here. Actually, Bertil, do me a favor and click done on Catherine's question there so we can move that over to the answered tab. Thank you. Hadid, thanks for the question. Hadid asks, it is super important to truly pay attention to what a customer is saying. How important would you say is it to pick up on what's not being said? Sivan, you wanted to jump in on this out of the gate.
Yeah. I love this question. I think, again, like we talked a lot about, the oversharers, but you have the undersharers, the people who do not engage. I think it's incredibly important to pay attention to whether call out or note, and use that also as evidence of something, whatever that may be, of someone who maybe is not sharing at all or very little, as well as, reading between the lines, I guess you could say. So I think that happens a lot with customers, especially, and it can be hard to differentiate. Is that more around maybe the culture of the organization they come from? Or, we talked about having cameras on, but I think actually, I think maybe Jennifer, there was another question. Right?
Jennifer, there's a question there about techniques to judge active listening in the virtual world. Yeah, exactly. And so, some organizations, I've gotten on a call with 10 people, 30 people, and not one of them turns on their cameras. Or, I've met with a client for a year and I've never seen their faces. Sometimes me turning my camera on encourages them to turn their camera on, or to say, oh, sorry, I haven't turned my camera on. And sometimes it doesn't at all. And so finding a way to connect with them and to encourage them to share, even still, maybe calling it out. Okay,
totally fine. I'm great. Camera's off, and I don't see your face, but would love to then let me know if this is resonating, right? Since I won't see you nodding or anything, I definitely need to hear from you. So I think that's one technique, kind of like combining those two questions a little bit.
Yeah.
But as far as the reading between the lines, I also think that sometimes someone might be sharing something about a pain point that isn't really that isn't really quite the pain point. And so those discovery questions that I think are key to being a CSM, to ask more and to dig into a point where maybe they've moved on and that's not what they're focusing on in their words, but coming back to that and really digging in, I think are some techniques to handle that.
Yeah, that's where the being really good at asking open-ended questions and kind of peeling the onion back and going deeper and clarifying and things like you should never be afraid to stop asking questions. If you get an answer that just doesn't seem complete, if you get an answer that it feels like there's something else there, then keep going. Keep it now. Let's go deeper on that. I want to better understand this. Bertil, you wanted to jump in. I knew you were. I assumed you were going to jump in, especially on Jennifer's question, because we talked about the whole virtual world of customer success.
I can start with one and then jump on the other one. But one thing about Sivan, what I love, and we had the conversation on Friday during the prep with Sivan, was really the face-to-face. I don't know for you, but I'm getting so sick about staring at letters and frozen pictures. Like, I want to see you. And I'm trying to humanize the process. And thank you, Sivan. I appreciate that. So
it's just not the same.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. The game I have with some client who will not do it, I would say, because I'm working a lot with IT client, I would say, okay, but don't put a picture. If you have to put a picture, let's have theme. Next week, we do pets. And we were able to break the ice because one gentleman had a pet. It was a huge spider, and I am so scared of spiders. And we had 10 minutes conversation about spiders. And I brought my dog, who is beautiful and at the bottom of the food chain because she's adorable. But we were able to break the ice without the camera. So if your client doesn't want to put their camera on, find a way to break the ice by understanding who they are. Always invite them to put the camera on, but give them a heads up and say, hey, we have those recurring meetings. Let's humanize the process. I really want to see you. And you're going to be able to not only be more into the conversation, but get them more in the conversation. The last things I would always recommend is don't do 30 minutes, don't do 60 minutes, do 25 minutes, do 45 minutes, and be honest and say, hey, Sivan, we have this conversation. Really like our partnership, but I want to give you some time back. Let's do 15 minutes and jump in right in. They will appreciate you because they are back to back on meetings, and having 15 minutes to go and grab a tea or coffee will take you a long way. Jennifer, what technique works best to judge active listening in the virtual world, especially when everyone does not use their camera? So, ask question. My grandmother, when I was a kid, we were having this huge dinner together and no one was listening to her. And one day she started saying, and this is how her husband killed his wife. And everyone stopped and looked at her and said, what are you talking about? And that was her way to bring back the conversation to her. I'm maybe because I'm French, I like to pull that kind of card during this conversation by saying something really not appropriate. My wife will hear me and say, Bertil, you should not say that. But because with the thick French accent, it works. So don't do it if you don't have an accent. If you do, you can play a little if you are in a foreign country like me. Humanize the conversation, bring the information, the conversation back to you. If you feel like you're losing the audience, just change gear, bring something else.
So I can get away with it if I talk like this. Okay, see, thank you. D, Jennifer, thanks for the question. Sivan, can you hit done on those two questions? Awesome. Jesse, we still got time. Let's see if we can get through the rest of these. Jesse asks, sometimes you're working with what I would describe as the C team, and they don't know what their goals are or why. They don't know who is responsible for what, but it's definitely not them. Getting stakeholder responses are slow to come. I struggle with those types of interactions to get meaningful progress. what would you try to do? C team. Wow. Yeah, that's Daniel, you want to jump in on this? Go for
it. I'm assuming we're talking this like the C-suite, right? Like
I'm assuming it's the C-suite. Let's just go with that.
Yeah, not one below the B team.
Yeah. Maybe it's the B team as opposed to the A team. Right? I don't know.
Right. If you're playing with subpar talent, level up. No, I'm just kidding. I think like this is a very classic challenge. Somebody makes a purchase motivated by an overall objective. The execution of that initiative is delegated down to somebody who is not involved in the sales process. They have other initiatives, other goals, other, things that they're working on. So trying to squeeze this into their life is a little bit of a square peg round hole situation. I think there's a number of great ways to try and tackle that. I'm really maybe I'll get a t-shirt after this. I make all my whole team take the accidental project manager course from Success Hacker. I'm dead ass serious. Sorry, this is not planned.
I swear to God, that was not a paid placement at all. Not a paid placement at all.
They do a great job of explaining, that this every project, there's a point, it's going to sub-optimize the organization, but eventually you are going to be exceeding even your current productivity. And that is encouraging for everybody. So executive stakeholder, you're going to get the results you need. And, tactical stakeholder, you're going to get your life back, right? Like that's the carrot that we're dangling for everybody. And so if we can get everyone rallied around that, I think then the challenge is drawing that alignment between what is the goal and then who is going to execute that. Because very rarely does that person who's been delegated the task of getting it done have the authority to then pull in the other departments and other key stakeholders that probably are going to be needed. Like rarely does one person know all the answers to get something stood up, implemented, and optimized. So a delegated taskmaster is not going to have the pull to get, the head of finance on the call to knock out these questions. So trying to figure out a way to triangulate, hey, I know we bought this for the increased revenue gains. So-and-so doesn't quite have the answers or is looking for some information from CFO, head of accounting, whatever, can we coordinate a meeting using that to leverage? And just very simply CCing them on an email, just getting visibility on it from a different point. Again, what's in it for me, the executive, this will get off your plate if you just tell me where I need to go. Like this will not be an open initiative. You're not going to have to ask for a status update again. We'll just knock it out. Tactical stakeholder, we'll make progress. You don't have to run around asking who can I work with for this, or can somebody, give me this information. So again, kind of leveraging what's in it for each of those individuals and then trying to make sure that everyone has eyes on what you're trying to achieve. A big part of this is accountability and communication. You need to, you can't escalate without demonstrating that you've made the necessary efforts, on the lower levels. And so I think that really goes to maybe the core of being able to just generate momentum, because that is so hard. From that, we've signed, we're so excited we couldn't get this thing off the ground. We got to leave. It's heartbreaking as a CSM or an implementation.
So somebody's accountable for that spend. Somebody's responsible for that money being spent, right? And somebody's head's going to roll if there's no return on that investment.
I agree. I think also so much of CS is not sugarcoating and not shying away from a topic or a statement or opinion. And so when it comes to that accountability that Daniel, you're referring to, right? I think it's okay to say, hey, we need someone to own this. And right now we don't quite have that. I'm working with an account manager and an implementation consultant right now, who the three of us have decided that's what we need to say to the client. Now it's just a matter of which one of us is going to say it. But I think saying point blank, up until now, here's what we've accomplished. We will accomplish more. And to your point, also, this could be taken off your plate. If you're not the right person, we want to take it off your plate. We want to help with that because I know you're so busy. So again, calling things out, similar to when someone isn't listening, right? Calling it out, or not rudely, of course, but I want to make sure this is productive for your time. So let me know if this is still a good time, or if there's something else that is, taking up your time. Kind of like acknowledging that maybe the active listening isn't there at the moment.
Yeah. And another just tactical suggestion is, if you think you have an idea of the way to solve it, suggesting that to the executive stakeholder to get them, don't try and get them to come up with the idea on their own. Plainly say, I think we could do this if we brought so-and-so into the conversation and had a 30-minute meeting. Can we set that up? That's way easier than just presenting a problem to an executive and, giving them another thing that they need to solve. They're looking to get things off their plate, right? So I think being prescriptive with suggestions, you have a much higher chance of getting a yes, or getting, the answer that you're looking for.
And we can move then, Andrew, to another topic maybe next year, which is how, as a CSM, can you have some self-promotion internally? And back to Sivan and Danielle's explanation is really, how can you present yourself as someone who brings a workaround and actions and things for themselves, and scale essentially at the level of your own executive team and bring value internally. So that could be another conversation to have as well in 2023.
We'll add that to the list. All right, I think we got time for one more question. We have a question from LinkedIn Live from Sven. Any advice on how to cope with the amount of feature requests in startup phase, where requests are more than we can handle and they're all super valid requests? It's prioritization. You just got to prioritize. It's that simple. You got to prioritize based on the impact and the number of people that it's going to affect, and the kind of cost that it's going to have on your engineering team. And what have you, and I think you need to listen. Personally, I think you need to listen to all those requests, and you need to actively listen to customers and understand what's important to them and what's not. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do them.
Yeah, I think drawing a line, saying that I'm here to understand the request, but I can't make it happen, and this is our development process, and if you can help me understand how it would benefit you, I can absolutely advocate. But I think really part of it, and I always tell my team, put yourself in a box. There's only so many things that we can address. And my job is to help you use the product, the features, the system that you have today to achieve the goals that you purchased it for. You set out with this thinking it was a reasonable solution to the issue. So if you still believe that to be the case, it's my job to help you use it. There's another team that's here to help improve that, and we can pass that feedback along. But
at the end of the day, we are the messenger to communicate inside from outside and outside to inside. Don't kill the messenger, but I see often client being satisfied with with a negative answer and said, this year we will not move forward with this specific feature, and let's explain why. And at the same time said, what's your goal? Why do you need this feature to be released, and by when, and how that's going to impact you? And then what I find interesting is often you can present another feature that will enable the client to go after the same goal. And this feature will be released on time. So it's really being a true partner to your client.
And at the very least, making them feel heard, right? Even if it's not going to happen, they feel heard, and they still feel that the partnership is strong.
Exactly. All right. Well, we're at the end of our time we've got for today. I think it was a great conversation, but it's not what I think. It's what all of you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself, our guests, or Success Coaching. I want to thank my amazing panelists for spending the time with us today, and for their ideas, thoughts, insights, and best practices that you shared. Thank you all. One final note, great CSMs know that they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created the CSM Mastermind, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. We hope to see you again at our next event on November 16th, when we'll talk about understanding and defining customer business outcomes. Until then, make sure you make space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your day, week, and month, everybody. See you soon.